4, 5, and 6. Although plan number 6 again, I don't support that at all because it's going to be a limited leaders overseeing a big portion of the schools, and the need for each school is different. So lobbying for 6 or 7 schools as one board is going to be a lot of work. أديك أدكوين كنا نتعين بيش بعصانا دهنا هاز تاني 100 and Quishin day, and then we went down to 88, and then we went down at 24ish. So is it working or is it not working? Sometimes I hear our chapter delegates saying that, oh, I was at this chapter, and then we're kind of like at the tail end. So it's Aban's case, so I don't support number 6 at all. But I do support number 3 and 4 for our chapter, for our school, because we have 3 board members and 1 at large. And the at large oversees the 3 chapters around us, which makes our school, the 3 chapters. So without Asian, although I wanted to make that comment. And again, I don't support number 6 because that's just gonna shortchange our other schools. And then just talking right now, I do also have another concern on the different types of schools. There is a BIA, the contract, and then there is the grant schools. How are the laws going to change, or how are the compliance going to be different between each school board member? And then just now thinking about it again, these schools quite again combined nahi. Well, they just have 1 board member per month, like Pinyon and let's say Cottonwood, or are they going to have 2 board meetings per month? Will that also change the Title 10, the stipend things? You guys can change it? That would be my question too. I don't know if I make sense or not. I should get it all time. So that would be my question too.
In addition to your comments, there are questions popping up. May ask a question about how this might impact even the Census 2020 that's coming up. Census 20, decennial census, every 10 years it's totally an independent constitutional exercise by the United States government. So that's something not to eat that though. In it, of course, it asks for ethnicity questions, race question as to what race you are. American, Indian, after that, the next question is what tribe. I'll make sure you put Navajo first. If you put Apache Navajo, you're gonna get counted as Apache rather than Navajo. So that combination, they're still working on that. So make sure you're counted Navajo. They're so used to being away, even though they might still identify with themselves as Navajos. The 140 Navajo Nation has you got to be 1/4 blood Navajo in order to qualify for being Navajo member. AD has that psychological impact on a lot of us, and if they're less than 1/4 Navajo, they're not going to count themselves as Navajo. It's something that is of a concern, I think. Something that perhaps somehow can be addressed through the Navajo Nation government too as well. It doesn't have any direct impact, but in terms of future analysis, numbers it would be interesting to look at enrollment, local school enrollment, and then what the count comes out of the census. In that sense, there's some relevancy. She go with that. But that's the only question I thought I would answer. Could I know I don't know if you want to, Mr. Silva, want to address that.
Sure. On one of the other questions about combining schools under one administration, that our intention here is really that this plan is only about the school board, but the actual grantee, as we understand it, they still stay intact. Nosley Incorporated still stays as the school, the same way the other school. The only change is, I guess what you're talking about is it going to be, through this plan, combining this organization together? No. It's Nosley still, your administrative apparatus still stays as the school, and whatever school that has their own body, that still stays intact. All that changes, according to this, is just the governing board operation. But the process that you're talking about actually merging or combining schools, that's a whole separate process, and all this is really is just who the school board is, the governing body.
Just clarification, like on page or this, combining Pinyon Community School and Black Mesa Community School. So let's say I'm one of the board members there. So I know the administration is going to be the same, separate. But as a board member, will I be attending 2 board meetings per month? One for Pinyon Community School, then I get my stipend from there, and then I go to Black Mesa Community School. Do I get my stipend from there, or is it just going to be one board meeting combining both agendas? So that's my question.
Yeah, well, the way I sort of understand it is that really it's going to be up to the local school board about how they conduct business. Nothing in this is trying to disturb local control or governance of the school. But if you do have one board that oversees 2 schools, it would make sense that you would combine the business of both schools. But again, that's really the decision of the local school board. And in that respect, the nomination stipend policy and travel policy would also apply. And it would also be up to the local school if they wanted to cost share and stuff like that.
So when that question was asked immediately as an administrator, must I get together with the administrator from Black Mesa and begin to prepare policies? The policy the board gives me is contracts. The contracts are between the employees and the board. On a day-to-day basis, contract. And it's because I hold that contract, and I say that contract is between you and the board. You said you were going to fulfill this position, there's a position description. So does that mean that the administrator and I have to get together and refine those position descriptions? So there's a policy, there's a contract, there's a position description. The other thing is, on an annual basis, my supervisors go over those position descriptions, those contracts, and then they tell me if they have the human resources to achieve their goals in their respective departments with the finances that they have. So that's going to be additional work with me and the co-administrator at the next school. Here's the other one that came to mind. I have corporate meetings that I hold with the board. So must Marlita and I, let's say she's the administrator over there, Marlita, does that mean we have to prepare corporate meetings? Combining both ideas, agendas, purposes, missions, visions for that school and my school. I go over that vision, I go over that mission with my staff, so they can run their departments, and together we're all one team meeting that vision and mission for every child in our school. Those are just questions that came up. Thank you for asking, Marlita.
Can you say your name, please?
Oh,
You're an administrator?
I'm the administrator of Pinyon Community School. My name is Sylvia Largo.
Thank you.
Okay, we can sign up.
Thank you, Ms. Largo. So ADOTS, I don't know if that's being looked into, but I'm sure there is some probably some work going into it. But you figure that you're going to have a board, yeah? A board is a board overlooking different entities. And Eastern Navajo is going to be worse than this. There's one board is going to be overlooking like 3 or 4 schools. You know, so those are some fair questions I think you have. And then that plan number 6, that Marlene referred to as the worst case scenario, where it's one board is going to be overlooking half the agency. Yeah, come on up, please.
I mean, at the other end, you also do have some existing grant schools that actually have other 630 programs. So in that sense, they already have multiple programs under one board. If you look to Alma and Rama, they have the school board, but then they also have the 630. So they're able to work things out. So it's going to be up to that board how you conduct your business. So in that sense, if you do have a combined board with 2 schools, you will basically try to work out what's going to work best. And the idea is that the day-to-day stuff is primarily the work and business of the administrator. That's why they're there. And the board is about policy and governance, unless your board is really involved in day-to-day business. So in that respect, I mean, you do have boards that have multiple programs.
Okay, Marlita can attest to this. I oversaw a charter school at her school. I was so impressed with the Arizona school boards. I was so impressed with them and the way they conducted business. I took the whole board with me. And we would sit there and they would boom, 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 boom. So I'm trying to sit here to envision how our school boards can make business matter decisions within a timely work frame and have their agenda items in a row. I'm sitting there thinking that through. I really did get stuck on the policies. I'm thinking if we're going to combine schools, we're going to need one policy. The contract, sige nana, where's Mr. Bilta? Let's say he is going to be hiring and he's making his administrators making recommendations, and it's going to be on the board agenda. I think that one's doable. It's going to be that one board. The board's going to act. They're going to be acting as a unit, and they can't. I can see that. That can take place. It's just going to be the policy that's going to have to be fixed, and both schools are going to have to use only one policy.
Thank you.
I thank Mr. So and Mr. Roger for having this public hearing on the school board reapportionment. I don't know that school board members or other visitors that are here. Okay, public comment, and I hope that our comment would be seriously considered. We have to see Shane Shaggy Harrison Bayer. I am with the Miniform High School Board. I'll be serving my 2nd term there. I call the plan a little bit too many. I wish it was less. I could have been talked it out and maybe presented 2 or 3 whatever that would have been good. So accordingly, I let combine those 90 oil. I kind of really disagree with it. One plan said to combine mini farm high school with mini farm community school. What I saw, I really disagree with that. Mainly because I'm right now with the BIA, and we go by the CFR regulations, doing everything, policies and everything. There's a lot of different requirements under the BIE. Now, because the community schools, they have their own school policies and procedures. If we combine these schools, one with the BIA policy, another one with the local school board policy, one board overseeing the both meeting. If you have the meeting for the high school and the grad school, because you're going to be working with two different policies. Another thing is combining high school with the lower grade school. Because you would be advocating for the high school and then at the same time trying to work with the lower grade school. Keep the community school and the BIA school are different. What are they? Have their own school board members. Like Larry said, I would support number 1 at this time. Maybe I can probably support reducing the school board to 4 members. Thank you.
Well, Ms. White, could you sign it?
In the combined board plans, 2 and 3, they keep BIE schools separate from tribal control schools. That's the way that was set up, with the concern that there's already existing policies. So tribal control schools up in the that there's separate policies than what BIE would have. So that was the concern. One of the earliest concerns that we got was exactly that, was not to mix the 2 up. So plans 2 and 3 respect that.
And if you look at the plans 4 and 5, on the first page, that's separate. That's keeping the boards pretty much as is, and it largely follows your existing schools apportionment plan. So if you look at Plan 4 and Plan 5, they try to follow your current apportionment plan as much as possible. And it keeps the boards pretty much as is with all 63. But it all depends what your enrollment is. So it's either a 4-5 board configuration or a 3-4-5 school board configuration. So Plan 1 again follows the 63 school boards all across Navajo, which is 3 to 7. Plan 4 is a 4-5 configuration, which is what nomination currently is. And Plan 5 is a 3-4-5 school board configuration.
Anyone else? In terms of school sizes, I'm Mr. Harrison, you mentioned that that going down to 4 is okay, and when you have an opportunity for the high school to have 6 members. Can you comment on that? I'm a little just from a numbers perspective, yeah, the number of students, see, that's what controls these numbers. So with the higher enrollment, like the high school, Tuba Boarding School, Fort Wingate School, see if they have high enrollment, but for some reason they're preferred lower numbers of board members. Can you comment on that? I want to better understand that from my inside. Why do you prefer 4 over 6?
Well, right now, mini farm, we have 5 members. But current plan gave out traditionally 5 members, that would be the same. But I don't mind if it's reduced to 4, because a lot of time when you have maybe 6 or 7 board members, then it looks like you don't really get things done right away. Just people talk, and put down the evening. So I would prefer that it be 4 or 5, but that would be good one, darling.
Okay, Michelle, thanks. Anyone else? Please feel free to come up.
Well, let me answer that question before we get started. Good morning. Shady Anderson, Junior, Shadow, Toy, Cleaning, Snow, the Bethlehem, I represent the Navajo Preparatory School Board for the Chinle Agency, and looking at the plans that are in place right now, I favor like 4 and 5. That would benefit what we're looking for as far as the school I represent, but also looking at what the Chinle Agency is looking at and moving forward. I know it's keeping to the traditional outline of what the board's situation should look like currently, and then also looking at making a recommendation to Mr. So or Mr. Rogers here. And those plans 4 and 5, maybe you could have delineated the separations as 4A and 4B and 5A and 5B. So that way, as we're filling out these forms and we have our preference, we'll be able to distinguish like which plan and 4, if it's the first one or the second one. You know what I mean? So, like for mine, I would say 4B and 5B. Yeah, so that's how I would look at it, because it's a little confusing by looking at the packet, how that's designed and how it's approached. And I know it sounds a little confusing the way Mr. Rogers is defining that as well as he's presenting on this piece. So moving forward, the next couple of days, I would say that maybe how you would distinguish the 2 differences, so it's easier for the audience to understand. And then looking at the questions that are asked about the policies and so forth, I know that's more on-site decision-driven, and right now you're looking at what plans would support the need for the board reapportionment. And I think as you're presenting that, you need to remind your audience of that as well, that we are only talking about the board reapportionment. And yes, there are other factors that come into play at the decision-making and so forth, but those are also driven at the site level, at the school site level, to determine how those changes may come about. The practices that are in place right now, as board members, we are more of an advisory council rather than, common times I hear micromanaging from community members about board members and so forth. So at Navajo Prep, one of the initiatives that we take as a board is to make sure that we share out with our community and our stakeholders that we are here as an advisory committee. We're not here to micromanage the situation. So it takes me back to the discussion that was brought up by the opinion community member about how policies and so forth are coming into play. Policies are developed at the site level, at the school administrative level, that are brought to the board for approval, and we abide by those as a school community. So maybe that's another way to reframe that concept as well as you're moving forward in discussion and so forth. So, in looking at that, I know in plans 4 and 5, it keeps Navajo Preparatory as status quo from representation from each of the agency areas. So what I wanted to support in saying that is that, you know, with the history of Navajo Preparatory School is how it was developed by the Navajo Nation government back in the 90s, was looking at making sure that we churn out Navajo leaders that are coming forth from the school site. And a part of that process is also buy-in from each of the agency representation. So right now, for example, I represent the Chinle and Western Agency on the school board. So having that voice and having that shared information from both of those agencies that I represent on that board does share a good concern for families and students that are from those regency or agency areas. So it helps support in the development of what we're looking at as far as developing those future leaders for Navajo. So with that being said, you know, with the plans that are in place right now, I favor 4 and 5 because it keeps to that true initial understanding of what the Navajo Nation government put into place for the particular school at Navajo Preparatory. I know that all the schools that are listed have a history and context. They talk to how they were developed and so forth. And that also needs to be kept in mind as you guys are moving forward. And I totally disagree with Plan 6 because of what Marlena has shared earlier too, and then also just in review of the larger scope of work, that's too many schools to be handled under one board. I know that on the East Coast there are private schools, public schools that all share a county board as like a district would. That design should be carefully reviewed if this is what you're going to be pushing, Plan 6. How do they incorporate that large of a geographic area under that one board? How do they maneuver through that situation? Because Navajo, we don't like change, and that's a given. But within education, you know change is going to happen year to year because of how we move forward as a society, as a nation, and as a people. So as we're looking at that, bring in examples as to why the design was brought the way it is as you're presenting to. So that's what I see happening. That's pretty much all I have to say, because I just looking at that, I just was a little confused in Plan 4 and 5. Again, like I said, delineate the differences, A and B, so that would help as you're moving through. And that's it, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yazzie. I think the best way to look at 4 and 5 is that it's a status quo plan with boards as is on one side, and then the other is existing boards as is with hybrid consolidation, so it's kind of 2 plans in one. So one is the existing boards as is with the apportionment board where the distinct numbers being adjusted, and the other is kind of existing as is with targeted consolidation.
So my question would be to you guys again, so if it goes before HES this way, let's say that the body here says we want to go with 4, then how will HES determine which plan they're going to go with? Is it going to be the first group or the second group? See, that's what I'm saying. You need to decide on whether it's going to be 4A or 4B as constituents coming from the communities. And then I also wanted to add that data is a true driving factor. So numbers are telling the truth in our school systems. So I do appreciate that you are breaking down 4 and 5 according to student demographics and data that's being provided. The question I always ask is looking at our community schools, our grant schools, the BIE status schools, why are our enrollment numbers always so low? Is it because we're so close to the public or charter school settings and within the communities? And so maybe a little more insight to that might gather more feedback from the communities as well as you're moving forward with the plans. Because you know, I also, in my regular profession, I work with the Arizona Department of Education, and we're always looking at data, and that's what drives funding. So as we're looking at the proposals that are being set, we have to keep that in mind and be realistic as communities and as constituents from the communities that we serve, and that why are our numbers so low, and how do we address that as a community and as a school?
I believe you're so correct in terms of these the two options EIA within one, 2 and 1 EIA. So altogether we're considering then 8 plans instead of 6. Really, that's when it comes to just putting things right on the table, and there are 8 different plans then, and I'm glad you pointed that out. But since they're already numbered 1 through 6, we're just going to have to do a suffix like you're recommending, A and B. So you're recommending both 4 and 5B sets?
Yes, that's what.
Martin and Sean,
These are
you
all
recommended those
employees.
two, Nat, but you didn't specify if that's the case with you.
Well, for our school, A and B is the same,
Uh-huh.
so it don't matter if it's A
Oh,
or
but
B,
for-
for North City School, it's the same.
Oh, I see, okay. From your perspective, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I think you said Plan 3 as well. I think going back.
I think she said 3 and 4.
3, 4,
I
5.
actually said 4 and 5, I was looking at it,
4 and 5,
yeah.
but to you, it doesn't matter if it's A or B.
Yeah, but.
Because you're
Well,
isolated.
I would go with A.
You would,
A and 5A.
A is simpler?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we just wanted to make sure we jot that down correctly, but thanks for, did you sign it over here? Yeah. For Mr. Soyu, we want to make sure that there's a record of people that are actually speaking out. So, yeah. Nana, flash Nana. Sure, come on up.
Well, good morning. My name is Ron Thompson. I'm a voter from Chinle. So I'd like to thank all of you for voicing your thoughts, your opinions, and some of your concerns. Also with Mr. Yazzie there also mentioning that some of those really important areas. Well, there has to be somebody on the other side of the fence. I'm that person. My clans are cheap and snowing out. If I went to the chin, it's cheap. And although not cheap. So that side of the fence is no different than any other side of the fence. Is how I look at it. Being a public school superintendent or a charter school superintendent, or even working with the grant side. I've seen all sides as a superintendent. This side of the fence from where I stand from or work at is no different than the other side. So that's how I look at it. But in terms of policies, the young lady mentioned, I think that'll be something the administrators would have to work on. In terms of working with attorneys, right? Because you all have your attorneys in New Mexico, you know them. Arizona. It could be the same attorneys. We have the same attorneys working with the same grant schools, but they may be covering 8 grant schools with one attorney, right? It's there. So I list that too. Will there be a consolidation of attorneys? Has Doty thought about creating a consortium of Navajo attorneys that represent grant schools, tribally controlled schools? Right? Keeping the money here in Navajo. So those are some thoughts that I wrote down. The articles of incorporation, you know that. You board members. You have that in your applications. Will that change? Your bylaws are something I'm looking at, I'm thinking about right now. You know, would that have to be revised? You know, that's a question for all of you here. You know, it's not for the presenters. But those are some questions I would like to share.
What are you guys doing over there now?
Well, it creates cost savings. Because I look at the funds, I look at the travel, the stipends we pay board members, the mileage you collect,
That's what I wanted.
the per diem you collect. You see all of that money I look at, and at the same time, it's just a consideration. But at the same time, I have written here, the cost savings going back to the students. Do we have numbers from every grant school, tribally controlled school?
Outside of the.
From the BIE, on how much money we pay you, board members, you know, for mileage, for per diem, for travel.
Representative, but he didn't. Ruby.
But at the bottom end of this is for our kids. If you really look at it, I mean, it's what's best for our kids. And that's something that's written down in my office. Every time I enter or leave my office, what's best for our kids, our children. Even here in the Chinle agency. I am a voter here. I come in here, vote whenever the election day comes and so forth. But those are some things I wanted to share with you. And then the infrastructure, somebody mentioned infrastructure. I believe Mr. Ghazi back there, my chair, he actually took a look at that. Also this young lady here, and all of them mentioned that. Are we ready to have the infrastructure? You know, what does it look like? Mr. Ghazi did talk about other areas in the United States. You know, how does it work for them? You know, what would it look like for us? And what do we have to have in place before we move that direction? You know, do we have people hired? Are they experts in that field? Do we have people that are knowledgeable to move in that next direction? So when I mentioned I'm on the side of the fence, I'm looking at number 6. Okay? But I think those are some challenges that we're going to take a look at. And again, with Dodie and the HESI committee, you know, with Daniel and Paul and Charlotte and them all, they're going to have to take a look at it and some things to consider. So, but number 5 does look something like an apple in a tree. Okay, some of you mentioned 5 looks doable, you know. So, but overall, it's just minimizing the number of board members is what I look at. So, but I haven't heard, you know, anything else other than that. You know, it's something that I think that they're going to have to consider. It's just more of an opinion on my end. You know, being a community member here in Chinle, you know, my kids, my family are here, and so forth. So. But other than that, I just wanted to share my thoughts with that. And last but not least, you know, it's actually working together, right? And that's the bottom line. Because we really don't know how to deal with conflict. We don't. We either ignore it, we put it to the side, and don't address it. But I come from that end. Is if there's a conflict, we have to deal with it. And we're going to have to work together on this. Now, regardless if we're from, you know, a different school, from Black Mesa, you know, from Mini Farms High School, from Pinyon, Noslini, you know, Navajo Prep, Shanto Preparatory. That's where I work at Shanto Preparatory. I'm the superintendent there. Yesterday they were in the city area. I was so busy yesterday, I couldn't get out of my office. So that's why I'm here. And of course, with my agency. So, but at the same time, that's something I look at. So I would, you know, I guess I'm the only one for number 6. Just, you know, and of course number 5, someone of us mentioned number 5. So, but I wanted to share that today. It was awesome to meet both of you and listening and the packet, the way you presented. So, but I think that's everything I have listed down. It will work. I really believe that it's going to work. You know, that's the last thing I have here. We're just going to have to work together on this, right? So, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you too. Sajnan, yeah, Mr. Bruce.
Number 1, Kishi, are we losing a membership to Navajo Preparatory School? Because it's not mentioned in number 1. On this one.
Number 1? It should be listed there.
So for Navajo Prep and the plans, the only numbers that keep Chinle agency representation are 4 and 5. The other plans don't include representation from Chinle agency, but they do have representation from Saley, Wheatfield, I think in one of them, but the rest all move towards Northern and other agencies. So that's why I was asking, how were the plans kind of created to fit the scope of the work and the division of the plans that are in place for the current board members? Not current, but for the plan in place for the plans 1 through 6.
If you actually look, if you look at the plan, Navajo Prep, because it's a northern agency, that's where Navajo Prep is located. So if you look at Navajo Prep's apportionment plan, you'll see that they're actually located in northern Navajo. On plans for the 4A, 4B, 5A, 5B, Navajo Prep's apportionment plan really pretty much is one board member at-large from Northern Agency, one board member at-large Eastern Agency, one board member at-large Fort Defiance, and I believe the Chinle position is combined with Western Agency, so it's Chinle plus Western Agency at-large. So you are correct. But Chinle is represented, but it's only reflected primarily in I think, Plan 4. I think in Plan 1, it's more or less narrowed down to just 1 or 2 chapters out of Chinle Agency. Yes.
If you look at Navajo Preparatory School, is not segregated in any agency. It's outside the Navajo Nation. It should be treated differently, maybe the same way you guys are handling it now. It should be mentioned under Plan 1. It's not, because they're outside the Navajo Nation, so it should be treated like a nation. They're being under Northern Agency. They do black stepping. I don't know what agency placed that one under. The same way with Winslow. So what's that? Agency, so they're outside the Navajo Nation. So they mean they treat the same way. Yeah, they're now currently. This is
These plans are set up according to the way Health, Education, and Human Services Committee would select one. Yeah. Of course, so there's 8 plans that is being considered here. Of course, after all the hearings, after they get a report, after they deliberate on it, they'll say, this is the plan that we will select to go forward with. So that's their decision, yeah. So of course, even the way this is presented to you, they're broken down by agencies. In Johnny, Mr. Lota, the geography is very important. We got the main Navajo Nation, we got the 3 satellites of Nana. Geographically, those are way out there, I need to isolate. So that makes it problematic, like when you come to the Navajo Nation. So under the district system, you get grazing district, as you recall, they were always the last 3 batch. Alamo, Rama, and Canacito. In doing the initial analyses that I work with, Navajo Prep, their number their number was 97. So 90's numbers either off reservation. Ado, Kinlanado, Tsayak, Isiakin, Winslow, Residential, and Ridgefield. But in setting up for the public hearings, they have to be combined into an agency. So you're correct that it's not necessarily in the Plan 1. It does still address it, but it's under Northern Agency, like Navajo Prep or Kintigate. So that's about the best I can put it. Is the reason why they had to be put into this format.
So the format that's here is generally, this is the format that the election office uses when they set up. So the format we try to follow closely is to follow whatever the HESI is going to approve, and this is the format that the election office is going to use when they fill the school board positions. So this is the format that the election office will use when they do decide what those school board seats are going to look for. And the way, like for Navajo Prep, the way they classify Navajo Prep is because the more over on the northern side, they're within the Northern Agency, even though the school board is 5 different agencies. Maybe one of the biggest changes maybe I can go over is is with Rough Rock Community School, because it is this area. Well, one of the biggest changes compared to 8 years ago and 4 years ago is when you look at the apportionment plan, which is the as-is, Rough Rock has a Fort Defiance agency at large, a Weston agency at large, a Chinle agency at large, and 2 out of Rough Rock Chapter. But then when we plugged in all the numbers for that particular school, that there was really no representation at a Western, and there was really no representation at a Fort Defiance, maybe just a kid or two. And so the question when it comes to apportionment is, how do you apportion for board seats that have no kids? Because what the law at the end of it requires is that you have to look at the students that come out of the chapter and how much enrollment is. So the way all these apportionment plans are is trying to adjust primarily where the numbers of kids come out by chapter. So if you look at all the apportionment plans for like Rough Rock, Pine 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, all of those look into where the heaviest concentration of students come out of. So that's probably one of the biggest changes I can think of is going to be with Rough Rock from this area. So rather than having a whole Western agency at large for Rough Rock, it's more or less focused for many farms, Rough Rock, Brown Rock, that Chinle, that area. And I think that's one of the schools that has had a big change in enrollment. Do we have any more public comment? Any further comment?
Yeah, I'm Mr. Bill Clyde. I'm not from here, I'm from Kayenta. But I noticed that last year I represent Richfield at large with about 4 chapters here in this area. I think it's Chinle, Cottonwood, and many farms, I think it is. But I like the plan number 3 and number 4. But the reason, I guess, I know I've served, this is my last term, I guess, as a school board for Richfield. And also in 2018, I was elected to the BOSBA Executive Board also. The reason, I guess, I'm really concerned about our kids' education. I don't know how many of you have kids, but and to hear all their schools, they're struggling. Shisha is so kiddo to you. We have 16 grandkids. And I want them to have a good school. When I move back to Kayenta, I graduated from BYU. I wanted to make sure that the public school was serving good stuff to my kids, that they're learning. And I can say today, every one of my kids, we raised 5 boys and 2 girls. Every one of them they're holding degrees and being managers today. And I even have 4 state championships in my house. That's how, I think that we really need to look at our kids. What can we do for our kids' education? We have 66 schools on the res that are either BIE or BI or grad school. I keep hearing their academic scores. I keep hearing our kids are just obese. It just hurts. It just hurts to hear that. And we have something that we can do as people on the Navajo reservation, is to help these wonderful people that are doing this. Dodie, their staff, I prize them very much for what they're doing. I'm hoping that and praying every day that my people will wake up, that we can help our kids out there. We call it Navajo Nation education. I support that. But then Richfield Durham administration says, Mr. Clyde, how can we keep you? We have our kids that are just thriving up there. Even though they come from the res, they come up there to the dorm and they're reading at 3rd grade or 5th grade. And we have a staff that I don't know if you ever seen a Navajo guy get mad. I can't cuss, but I can sure tell you, that you gotta do your job. And we have a staff that's united, the board is united. And those kids up there are just taking over the schools up there. I can't believe it. I go up there and all these kids say, look at my medal, look at my trophy. Last time we went up there about 2 months ago. We ate with the kids for Christmas, I think it was. They invited us up. And there's these 2 big boys. Man, one is about as huge as I've never seen a Navajo kid be. And the other one's not as, is right behind him. They took state in wrestling from the big school right there in Ridgefield. And they were so proud. And I said, Mr. Clyde, look at my medal, look at my medal. He's a huge kid. But we should be proud to help our kids. That's all I wanted to share. I go to Western Agency, that's where most of our kids are from. But I'm really glad to be on the Bosba. We want to make a difference. I'm trying.